Well, you guys seem to like the last gimmick video a lot, so why not make another one? Here are my top 10 gimmicks that I'd like to see return. Number 10, Awakening. Imagine potential unleashed as a Beyblade gimmick, and you get Awakening. This gimmick was mainly known to be on Valtryek. There was the variable and evolution drivers, and when wear down, would gain crazy speeds. Then there was the Savior layer, which had these little rubber blades, and when those came off, attack power would increase. There are also the Cho-Z bays with their turbo awakenings, allowing a bay to change its shape, and have burst stoppers as a bonus. There are technically other bays that had this gimmick, but weren't advertised. Except for you, Lucifer, you don't count. TT took this bay and said, yeah, if it breaks, it's a part of the bay. Although this bay is better off without its gimmick. The Awakening gimmick is pretty cool, and I hope it returns. Number 9, Height Changing. I really don't know what to say about this gimmick. I mean, it's changing a bay's height. What more can I say about it? The gimmick's name says it all. In the Metal Saga, Dark Gasser featured this gimmick, but I really like how the Achilles lineup added onto it by having the driver have a mode change along with the gimmick. It's a basic gimmick, but it's useful to have. Number 8, Magnets. Back in the Plastic Gen, there was a whole system based on magnets called the Magnecore system. This system had magnetic discs, spin gears, and even bay stadiums with magnets. Depending on the situation, a battle could either be endurance-based or really violent. I don't know how well the system was received, but I'd like to see it make a comeback in some new way. Maybe TT can make a magnetic barrier or something. Hey, there's a way to improve this gimmick. Although it depends on what type of metal TT uses. If it's die-cast, then we have a problem. Number 7, Reboot. The gimmick that gives your bay an extra kick. Dronder actually featured a similar gimmick, except this version was a reverse Final Survive. Leopard MS had the same gimmick, but fans mainly know versions like Final Drive or Ultimate Reboot. TT has been experimenting with this gimmick for a while, and I like to see different types of drivers and shapes come into play. Number 6, Rebound. This gimmick allows a bay to ricochet against other bays or against a stadium. The gimmick was mainly used on attack types, and though it didn't work well at first, it did improve over time. The gimmick was first featured on Valtryek, and while it did have the gimmick a couple of times, Dragon's entire lineup was based on it. If the gimmick does return, I think it should be on a defense type, since Prominence Valtryek used it the best. Speaking of Prominence, Number 5, Armor. I really like this gimmick. When it comes off, the armor can do some pretty good damage. Sure, it's a double-edged sword, but I think it's worth it. Even when the armor is doing nothing, it still has some use. There is a big problem if this gimmick comes back, because it would be very dangerous. The armor being made out of metal means it'll do more damage, but a metal piece flying around a stadium isn't exactly safe. And depending on how hard this thing hits, the armor could potentially go outside the stadium. So as much as I would like the gimmick to return, I can see why it wouldn't. Maybe they can put some rubber around it to make it safer or something. Number 4, Free Spinning. Free spinning is good for defensive purposes. The gimmick was used in a couple of different ways. Rock Ares had it on its spin track. World Spryzen had it on its chassis. The gimmick has mostly been used on layers like Diablo Nemesis, Lucifer the End, and some of the Wyvron bays. This gimmick is useful to have, and though it does cost some stamina, it's worth it. There's also a way to counter this because there are also free spinning drivers, which give a bay more stamina. The free spinning gimmick is great to have in more ways than one, and is worth the return. Number 3, Fusion. Fusing Beyblades together is so cool. I mean, there was a whole system based on it. This gimmick can change a bay's performance by changing the layer's shape and weight. There was a synchrone system that utilized it the most because, well, the whole system was based on it, so every bay could do it. There was also Right Eclipse. Hyperion and Helios were the last to feature this gimmick, and with just these two bays, there were 6 ways you could change the layer. The Fusion gimmick has great customization potential and is great to play around with. Number 2, Burst Resistance. Of course this gimmick is in the top 3, it's too good not to be. This gimmick was used in a number of ways. Joker and Bahamut were a few that used rubber resistance. Greatest Raphael used metal protrusions in its layer. There were also burst stoppers first featured on the Cho-Z bays. The burst stopper version did become OP later on. I've used Belial a lot, and its burst stopper is very hard to put back in. I think the Cho-Z versions are still the best when it comes to burst stoppers. They weren't easy to burst, but it wasn't completely impossible either. Burst resistance is a really good gimmick to have, and I think it's only a matter of time before it's implemented. Before we get to our number 1 pick, here are some honorable mentions. Engine Gear. This gimmick is like Final Drive. It was used in the Plastic Gen and was featured as its own system, and was brought back with Command Dragon and Royal Genesis. Weight Distribution. It was used in a number of ways, like Hollow Death Scyther and the Dynamite system. This gimmick probably should have been on my list, but I really want magnets to come back. Still not a fan of those metal balls though. If you want to know why, you can check out the other gimmick video. Number 1, Jumping. Number 1, Spin Stealing. Spin Stealing is one of the best gimmicks to have. It's taking an opponent's strength and using it against them. Who wouldn't want that? Well, I guess some people don't want it. Fafnir was the main bay and burst to feature this gimmick, but I can't help but feel that El Drago is still the Spin Steal King. And yes, I am totally biased when it comes to this statement. I really don't know which bay is better at it. I just like El Drago more.
But just remember this. There's only one reverse rotating bay that may exist in this world. Only one! This Meteo El Drago alone!
Spin Stealing is a great gimmick to have, and I'm sure eventually it'll make a grand return. Anywho, there are my top 10 gimmicks. Let me know what gimmicks you want to see return. Just a couple of things I want to mention that I got wrong in my last video. I said that Zeus was the last bay to have the gravity ball gimmick, but the last was actually Flare Dragon. I did mention that Jet Ryvron was the last to use metal balls, but they were used in a different way. But I was really only talking about the gravity ball gimmick, so I don't even know why I mentioned that. And honestly, I'm still wrong because metal balls were used on drivers. The other thing I was wrong about was Drasil S being the first to feature the gravity ball gimmick, when really it was the previous evolution, Metal Ball Defensor. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay animated.